Black Out Loud Media Group. I hope you all are enjoying this poetic series that I'm doing for National Poetry Month. Last time we had Danielle LeBoy, Poetic Nurse, and before that we had Monty Quinn. If you haven't listened to those episodes, please go back and listen to them. But next up we have Will Davis, Tethered Words Poetry, the poet formerly known as Francisco J. Douglas.
I'll do that and just lean into the mic a little bit. So this is called Permission. Poetry is permission. Permission for the reader and listener to partake and receive divine art. Living, breathing art. It is from within their very bowels which writers draw forth words, lines and stanzas that not only reflect uniqueness and beauty, but express a moment bound in time by timeless creatures that now you have been privileged to behold.
Welcome back to another episode of the Brown Sugar Cafe podcast, the place where poetry meets conversation. I'm your host, Terrence P. Elmore, and before we get into today's topic, make sure you hit that plus sign so you don't miss an episode. Also, please subscribe to my blog, thebrownssugarcafe.blog, and if you find any value in this episode or any other episodes, make sure you leave a heartfelt review. So with that being said, let's get to it. So, did Francisco Douglas disappear, or did he morph into Tethered Words? I mean,
wow. Yeah. Okay. So here's the backdrop to that. Okay. When I first started writing, I didn't. I probably started. I've always been a writer, right? I'm a pastor. I'm a speaker. I write sermons. I enjoy the process of writing. Okay, I speak, stuff like that. But when I started getting like honing in to, okay, what is my writing going to be outside of sermons or blogging or whatever it is, right? I couldn't, for some reason, I just couldn't call myself a poet. I feel like I didn't have the accolades or people didn't know me as a poet, stuff like that. And I was like, well, am I embracing poetry or am I just going to write and be a writer? I didn't know what was happening. But what I found was that how I was using writing, I was using it to as an advocate. I was using it to fight for people. I was using it to speak up on behalf of others, right? So that's the one end. The other part of it is that the places by nature of my job and people who I knew, I couldn't at that point speak up like, hey, this is Will Davis writing this thing. So it was almost a security blanket, if you will, or a buffer between me as a person, my position, the work I was doing, stuff like that. But also I needed to speak into some issues. So how could I do that without, honestly, without exposing who I was, potentially losing my job or offending the community that, whatever, stuff like that. It was kind of all of that encompassing, to be honest, all of that. So I figured, you know what? If I'm a write, I love symbolism. That's just who I am. Imagery. I love everything. So I was like, I'll choose a pen name that I could write under that means something to me, and then I'll just engage that in all the kinds of writing I was doing. So I wrote. There's even some newspaper articles or editorials you'll find under Francisco J. Douglas, all that kind of stuff. So Francisco is my great grandfather's name. And so I took that as my own, right, to just speak into my heritage as a Puerto Rican. J is kind of just a whatever standard J. It's just something to throw out there as a average Joe, I guess, if you will. But then Douglas comes from Frederick Douglass, who's one of my heroes, right? I just love. He literally is like came from the bottom, now we're here. Like the quote unquote, if you can use it, the American dream or whatever it is, right? But he did it. He had that, that drive, that perseverance to make it and be there for others. So Francisco J. Douglas came from that, and that's that's the vein that I wrote in, to be an advocate, to speak for others, to speak into some heavy things and just be like, I'm gonna put it out there, but also keep my family safe, my job safe, and then other people in the community. Well, people start to realize, and this story's getting longer, but people started to realize that like the way I write and speak anyway kind of sounds like this Francisco guy, you know?
Yeah.
And so then
I noticed that.
Yeah, and people were just like, "Is that you? Is that you?" And I was just like, "Whatever, it's me." But people weren't. Yeah, there was pushback, but people were like, "Yo, you got something. Like, don't hide behind a name anymore. This is who you are. This is what it is. Like, don't hide behind a name." And so then from there, I was also embracing that I am a poet, I am a writer there, right? And so I was like, all right, let me get a pen name, a pseudonym that's going to really speak to me. And so I love words, right? I'm a writer. This is what I do. But also I connect to people. I connect with people. I want people to connect to something higher, because, you know, I'm a believer, right? The spirituality, religious, like that's part of who I am. And so I just love the word tethered. And so that's where that came up, tethered words. And so that's where that morphed. So I no longer use Francisco J. Douglas. That died. But I am that person because I still write. I call it poetic journalism. You know, I have portions of poetry that speak into advocacy and social justice and immigration and right, like all that kind of stuff. So, but I am, and at this point, like really have sat and feeling the weight of tethered words, and that's who I am.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's because I've been meaning to ask you that, but I was like, as we were talking just now, I was like, well, shoot, this is the perfect time to ask.
Yeah.
Especially looking at the screen.
Yeah.
And I see, you know, I was like, well, hey, what happened?
Yeah.
You spoke about when you first started writing and when writing poetry, you were wondering like, am I a poet? I guess we have this image of what poets are supposed to look like, especially if you have like your favorite poets and people you may interact with. But like, how did you go from feeling like, am I a poet, to actually embracing it and saying like, this is me, this is who I am a poet?
So twofold. One, I had to embrace it and internalize it myself, right? Like, this is what I'm doing, I have a gift here. But then saying, okay, taking that and not just believing like, yeah, I have a gift here, you know, like, no, I have a gift here. And then second to that is being honest of, hey, do I have a gift here? Like this art form that I'm engaging, does it speak to people? Does it move people? Because that's what poetry, that's what writing does, right? That's what music does, like the creative arts. I am a creative. You know, I write, I draw, mixed media, all that kind of stuff. So then twofold. Am I going to embrace this? Is this who I am, where I'm going? Is it me? And then I had some friends that I allowed to speak into my life. And they're like, bro, you're a writer. Like, what else are you looking for? And I think it happens a lot of times in our lives. We are asking or looking for like the accolades, or I published a book, or whatever it is, you know. And I needed to move past that. And so a good friend of mine, Marcus Amaker, back in 2018, you know, I was wrestling with the same question, like, am I a poet? Can I call myself a poet? Can I take up that mantle? And he literally was like, dude, are you writing? Yeah. Have you been writing? Yeah. Is it poetry? Yeah. Okay, you're a poet. He's like, that's it. Literally, that's it. Like, stop it. Stop looking for somebody else to answer that for you. Like, this is what you're doing. Just embrace it. You don't need that permission from someone else. And I was like, it's that simple? He's like, it's that simple. And then from there, just embracing that, hearing that, speaking it over myself, and just doing it like, yes, I'm a poet.
Yeah, because I mean, just poetry in itself, it has so many different forms, so many different versions, and people have so many different types of poems, so many different subjects they write on.
Right.
And so it's like, it's so wide open and so broad that I think that some people, like, I had a conversation with one of my writer friends the other day, and she was saying how when she was first introduced to poetry, it was in school, and it was she can't even remember who the poet was, but it was very complex. And so she was called on in class to read it. And the teacher looked like disgusted, like she was reading it wrong. Because you have those people who feel like it should be a certain kind of way, and you know, but from that experience, she didn't like poetry anymore. That was it. But now in her adult years, because she's a writer, but now in her adult years, she's embracing poetry, and she started writing poems, and she loves it. And she's just like, what would have happened if I didn't have that experience? To touch on the point, like you said before, like everybody else's expectations.
Yeah.
And that's interesting, and it's crazy at the same time, because that's what we do in general in life. We look for other people's expectation, and not so necessarily where it's overpowering our own thoughts and stuff, but at some point in some part of our lives, we look for like, okay, is somebody going to appreciate this? Is it going to be received? But at the end of the day, you just have to get it out. Even if one person likes a poem that you wrote, I feel like you've done enough.
Yeah. You have. And I've been realizing and embracing the fact that like poetry and the arts, like it's freedom. It's freedom of expression. It's freedom of self. Like you're putting this out there, and whether or not somebody accepts it or embrace it, like you put it out there and that's you. So what you're doing is saying, this is who I am. This is where I am. This is how I'm processing. Take it. But like, it's going to be hard because you want to place your identity in that piece, but that's just a part of who you are, right? It's not the whole.
Right.
And so I think that's a distinction there. Is like, this is just a portion of who I am and what I'm giving you. It's going to hurt sometimes. There's no way around it. We're human. We feel, right? Especially if they don't accept it or embrace it. But that's not the whole of who you are. It's just a portion, right? And so I have learned to kind of give some grace there of like, oh, they didn't like it. Okay, that's cool. But I have 1,000 other poems, right? Like, again, it's just a piece of who I am. It's not the whole. Right.
Because it's really like disappointing to me when I hear like other poets talk about someone else's poetry and call it trash or something like that. And I'm just looking like, everybody's poetry is different. And if you're a true creative, you would understand and respect that.
There you go.
It may not be your lane or your thing, but like, I've never found myself looking at somebody else's work and being like, this is trash.
Nah, you can't.
Even if I don't relate to it instantly, I'm trying to figure out, well, where was this person writing from? What were they thinking or whatever? Because we're all different.
Right. And we all start on different spots, right? Like,
thank you.
Go back to your old poems or your old writings. Like, it probably was trash. You had to, at the very least, be like, nah, I'm gonna take this word or this line or rewrite it, right? It's not always the best when you first start. So,
and then it's a constant battle because you're always second guessing yourself. Like, there have been times I've written a poem and it might have been great when I first wrote it, but then I felt like I destroyed it by going back in and changing and changing. People embrace that last version, and I'm looking at it like, it was better before this.
Yeah. I think there's so recently I'm in the middle of editing a book that will be my first book, right?
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I need some clapping.
It's been a work in progress in years, but here's why I say that. I had some editing that I've been doing on it and sent it off to a friend to read it over, she's also writing her book. So we did a little exchange, right? And so she says, these pieces, they have to stay as they are because it's a poem that's written about a moment in time. It's a memory. There's a position. There was something you felt, sense, smell, thought, everything. So those poems, when they're written, I think it's just what it is, right? Versus, hey, it's a nice day. I'm writing. I just saw, a leaf blow in a wind storm, and I took that and wrote a piece, right? There's different poems that speak differently, or why you write it, or what inspired it. And I think that's the moment. Sometimes when you go back to, like, you write a piece, or maybe for me, I write a piece about a moment in time, right? If I go back to edit that and change it, then I'm trying to change that moment in time, and it's like that's where it unravels. Versus I'm being inspired by a seashell on the seashore, sitting next to Sarah, like. Those are different types of pieces, and that's what I'm finding. And I'm okay with a poem that was written 2 years ago for this book and leaving it as is, because that's what was happening at that time.
Yeah, that's very important. I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said that, because I've found some poems from years back and I didn't touch it or do anything to it, but I think it's important for my listeners, whether they're already poets or want to start writing poetry, to remember that, like, if you have captured a moment in time, your way of thinking is probably different when you look at it again.
Yeah.
I guess you could rework it, but if you do, at least keep the original.
Yeah.
And maybe, reference it and say, hey, I wrote this poem when I was 15, but now that I've experienced more in my life, here's with my continuation from it.
Yes. Or you might think different or what it is. Yeah. You're right. So what I've done, even, so for that set, for this book, I've actually written, it's like almost like a blurb or background. So it's a brief paragraph about where I was, what I saw that inspired that poem.
Oh, that's dope.
So yeah, so like, and the book is on immigration and things that I've, like, the ministry and the work I've done at the southern border. So the poems capture all these moments and conversations, right? Like, those aren't changing.
Right.
And again, this is poetry over 3 years, right? And so,
it's been that long.
Yeah, dude. Wow. It's wild. And so 3 years and probably like 6 different trips, something like that. So again, I wrote this blurb and say, I was, standing in a refugee camp here, this was happening, whatever. And then boom, at least it gives a little bit of background and understanding as to where I was, what I was thinking, what I, smelled, felt, everything, as best I can.
Could you talk about that experience and how you got started with the immigration? And I didn't even realize it's been 3 years.
Yeah. And I stopped. It's going on a year that I haven't been back. Yeah. But my sights, and this is in the same vein of just my immigration work. My sights are set towards Africa. So at this point, I'm scheduled to be in Africa, not less than a month from today. So,
oh wow.
But yeah, a little bit of background, and this speaks to poetry too. So I don't know if I coined the term, but I call it poetic journalism, right?
Yeah, I love that too.
I think art captures the heaviness of life, the darkness of life, and makes it easier to manage the tension, right?
Right.
And I think poetry does that too. You can take a ton of hits, but it lessens the blow or the hurt as you express it. And it heals at the same time. I think poetry is a healing genre of writing. So that's what I needed when I did immigration work. That I was always, not always, but for quite a few years of my life doing social justice work, right? Speaking, advocating for people, stuff like that. Well, immigration kind of came up as a Spanish speaker through friends and connections. Basically, they just said, hey, Will, your voice, who you are, how you speak into your community, I think this will help you see some of the people in your community, because we have migrants in this area. We want you to just see it, like, just come see what's happening, because it's not what you're seeing on the news, and we could use your voice. Would you lend your voice into it? And so that's what I did, back in 2020, or even end of 2019 into 2020, and did that for a few years. And so then from there, I realized, poetry is going to be the way to change the narrative of immigration in a positive light, bring healing to what's happening, and to echo the voices of migrants and sojourners at the southern border when their voices are typically stifled or intentionally shut down. And so I figured, you know what, I can use my position and, again, my voice to speak into their world, by nature of bringing healing and a healing word, right? But also potentially, like I said, change the narrative for us on this side, when we're so separated from what's happening at the southern border. And so that's what this book is. The book is captured stories of migrants, what I've seen, the work I did of just being there as an advocate, as a liaison, things like that, as a voice of healing as best I could, and to, through the art of poetry, hopefully shed new light and better light as to what's happening at the southern border.
Wow. Man, that's that's pretty dope. Man, I remember when you used to share like the pictures and stuff,
Yeah.
and you would drop a little poem here and there. I guess it's a little sneak preview of what
Yeah.
we'll get from the book. But I'm glad that you're at this process where you're getting somebody to look at,
Mhm.
the book, the manuscript, because I've been waiting on it. We've been waiting on it. Those of us who knew it was coming. So
Yeah.
I'm so happy to hear that. I love how you say poetic journalism.
Poetic journalism. Yeah.
Because of your Instagram page and anything that you do, YouTube, TikTok, or whatever, it's always something cool and visual. Like it's some sort of
Thanks.
man, flowers, feathers, it's all type of like cool things, and I'm just looking like, wow, like that in itself gives like a feeling, gives like a vibe before you even start reading. So how did you encompass the visual aspect with your poetry that you share or that you post? Like, how did you come about that, and like how important is it for you to just, because I don't think I've ever seen you share a poem and it's just words. It's always some sort of imagery. So how important is that?
Yeah. So this goes back to my roots as a creative. I grew up, I was born in Brooklyn, grew up in the city, all around the tri-state area. So and just to explain that for even your listeners, the tri-state area is like Connecticut, New Jersey, New York, but like New York City. And so I grew up in the metropolis of it all, right? So with that comes hip hop, right? Breakdancing, graffiti, like all that kind of stuff. So I leaned heavily, into hip hop and rap, but the art form of that was graffiti. And so if you know anything about graffiti, it's all about layers, right? Visuals, symbols, and things like that. And so then from there, refining my process of graffiti, it went into mixed media art, just layering. So I would, use spray paint, but also come in with acrylics. But then maybe I do some like cutting of magazines, right? Like just layers. So again, layers, because I just love symbolism. I want people to just catch something, and be like, ooh, what is that? Oh, what is this? Right? Like just add layers through it. So that background is what affected my poetry. So in my poems, you can read through it and it'll say one thing, but read it again and it means a different thing, or just layering, on that writing. And so with that, I wanted to continue capturing the mind and hearts of people through the visual aspect, and using my background, I guess, through graffiti to do that. And so I fell in love with the language of flowers. I think there's a strength and beauty there that even speaks into masculinity, that, in this day and age, right? Sometimes it's always just rough and tough and this and that, but it's like, nah, there's a beauty in the softness. So I just love flowers, and again, I want to capture your attention, capture your intrigue, and then bring the words in to kind of, mirror and match that. And so I do think about colors. I do think about information overload. I do think about even poetry overload. There's been a time where I literally wiped my Instagram, started over, because I don't want, I don't care for the algorithm. I don't care for the likes. I want people, if they come in and read something, I want them changed. I want them at the very least thinking something different, right? Feeling an emotion. So I don't care if there's not 800 poems up there. This is what it is, right? But I wanted to speak, mentally, and then into your heart, and then go from there. So I just like the dual aspect of that. So whether it's through photography, or I actually drew something, or a flower, you will definitely find a ton of flowers. Just stuff like that, man. I want it to always be integrated.
Yeah, because you have a ton of plants. Like, how many plants are you up there having?
Well, we just came out of winter, but my family, they say they walk into a jungle when they come into my house.
We've been trying to get into getting some more plants. We got a couple. That Monstera is doing a little rough right now, but everyone else is doing fine. Maybe I need to chat with you offline and see what type of
humidity, the water level. Yeah, man.
You touched on Instagram, which I'm glad you brought that up. I find that the poetry space is kind of weird on Instagram.
Oh, it's whack.
And you wouldn't think it. It's like we're all poets, we're all artists, we're all creatives. But then there was this whole thing of poets following other poets just to get a bunch of following, and then they just stop following each other. And I'm just like, if you really love poetry and you really love reaching out to poets and connecting with other poets, why does it matter how your following ratio looks? And to what you touched on about wiping out your Instagram, like when you started doing that, it's like my favorite poems of yours, I have to screenshot or I'll download a video because I'm like, I don't know how long this is going to be up here, but this is dope.
I think you told me that. You DM'd me, you were like, yo, stop deleting your Instagram.
Because I'm just like, it's been a couple times I wanted to go back and read something again and it was gone. I was like,
Yeah, because I don't always, again, it's not just about, I don't write for prestige, right? I don't do art just for the aesthetics. I don't like, and sometimes that's life too. Life is but a vapor. Yeah. You're going to get hit with something, and sometimes it's going to be a memory. So like appreciate it in the time and in the moment. And I'm speaking to myself now, right? Like I can easily move to the next thing, but maybe there's something to it with the whole Instagram, just leaving it. But I think you're speaking into something huge, that we hit a wave of, especially through the pandemic, of being separate, right? Humanity was shut down, and we realized like, oh, we need community. Poets are like the ancient prophets that we can speak into culture and see things a little differently than like the quote unquote the normal person, just because I don't have something else to say there. But and so you're right. We made a ton of friends, even internationally, right? We've been on poetry, jam sessions, stuff like that, and people that I still speak to. But that it became much of like, how do you keep these connections? Instagram changed how they work, right? But then the platform didn't speak to the true artistry of poets. And so I think, we saw kind of that dwindle, and people still touch base, but it wasn't what it was 2 years ago. Right.
Yeah.
So
it's like Instagram is just crazy in general. I remember when it first started, I was very excited because I love photography. And that's what it was. It was like a place for everybody to share photos, and all of a sudden it turned into 15-second videos.
I know.
And then it just
I think that it goes to a whole new level of just humanity and how we think and process things, and it's just everything. But I went on to like, I have Instagram, I started TikTok, I went on to Poetizer, which is just lends itself.
Oh, what's that?
Poetizer, I believe, was put together by Atticus, who's another a poet.
Okay, yeah.
And it's just poetry. Like, you're gonna go on there, you follow who you follow. You can publish a small book if of your poems and stuff like that. And it's almost like an Instagram, but just writing. And it's real simple. Yeah, Poetizer. And Atticus has done a great job with that. And I think that's for the true, again, just your average person. You don't have to be known with the, verified blue check. Like, just go in and read people's poems and where they're at,
Yeah, I like Humble the Poet, and he has his, Mighty Networks. It's like that little social app where you can kind of make your own little network. Mm-hmm. And I joined. I mean, same thing with him. It's like, you don't want to fight with their algorithm and all the things with social media, but you do have to put your stuff there so people will know. And that's crazy to have to think about that. But for me, it's just, I just put it out there, let it go, because I don't know who may stumble across my page later and they might see something that they might need. But it seems like it's more relevant with anything you do on YouTube. If you put something on YouTube, somebody will find it 2-3 years later and it just blows up. Yeah. And so it's just, I don't know, it's just crazy with these social medias. I know. But
and what's your intent, right? Like, my intent is not to be, I think there's something human, like, we want to be immortalized. We want to be remembered. We want to be known, leave a legacy. Like, at the end of the day, people want to be remembered for a time. And so as writers and poets, we give a lot into society and into our people through poetry, and speaking to current, like I said, the current culture and time and stuff like that, or just what we're seeing, we sense, we're empaths, right? Like just the whole thing.
Yeah.
And we bring healing. We can cut through nonsense, quickly and directly, and skillfully and artistically and stuff like that. But all in all, it's just like, what do you want to leave for that moment? And I think don't fight, or I don't anymore. I don't fight the algorithm. I'm not going to fight for that. But again, I'm going to put it out there, and whoever finds it, and that's going to be okay.
Yeah,
but that's me. Like, everybody's got to work through that for themselves, how much they're going to put out there. And some people are like, writing is their profession, so they have to make a push, right?
Have to. Yeah, that's true.
So that's just an aspect of who I am. And so I'm just going to go, Johnny Appleseed poetry here and there, whoever captures it, but at least it's been out there. And if it grows and it's planted in somebody's life, then I did my job. But that's me.
Yeah.
That's me.
Yeah, that's true. How do you, well, I guess you already explained this, so I need to ask that. I'm about to say, how do you balance being a poet in your day-to-day life? But I mean,
yeah, I love it. That's a good question. So I write for myself first, right?
Of course, yeah.
I have to release the day. I want to bask in the joy of what happened today. I want to experience something again. I need to process something, whatever it is. I'm writing for myself first, and really my writing. There was an aspect of my writing that was needed and encouraged by my wife. Needed to just release the tension of my anxiety, and just allow me to breathe. And then from there, it turned into prayers. And I was journaling prayers, and even like the Psalms from the scripture, like those are hundreds of poems, songs. Yeah. And I mean, through the whole Bible, like there's poetry all over the Bible. And so I say it's a language of God, really. Yeah. To be able to express in that way. And so I write for myself first, and then I've just found different ways. So whether it's I have a little notebook that I'll jot something down, or I just use the notes app in my phone, but I'm living life and just working through life, not because I'm a poet, right? Like that's just it's just a portion of who I am, and how do I express that. And so I don't really feel that pressure, for me. Like I'm just going to go about something inspired me, I'm going to write about it. Somebody speaks, I'm going to write about it. We're having a little interview over podcast, I'll speak. And I guess I've learned to unintentionally just switch gears, and even in how I speak or how I interview, it's a little more of a poetic flow, but I've just, learned to do that. And I think it just, by nature of who I am as an artist and how I layer my life, so poetry is just another layer in how I go about my day, So if I got to read something today, and I got, my son with me, but we got to go on a walk. Okay. I'm going to take my son on a walk and do some reading and or writing on my notepad, right? Like I just layered 3 or 4 things in one action. Right. I know not everybody thinks that way, but like for me, that's how that works. And then I accomplished that thing.
Wow. Okay. So
I don't know if that makes sense, but
that makes perfect sense to me. It does. So you talked about the Notes app, right?
Yeah.
And I use that sometimes too. You also have a typewriter.
Oh yeah, that's gonna be. But those are different moments, right?
Right.
My Notes app, I'm just gonna be like, I'm there. I'm waiting for my coffee. There's a thought that came, or a conversation I overheard, or a sound, whatever. Pull it up, write it, Just it's the raw and fluid. I'm not refining things there. I'm gonna just leave it. I mean, I have hundreds of poems that are literally unfinished, untitled.
Me too.
It's just there.
Me too.
And that's okay. And then other ones that I finish, then I'll categorize, or, in those moments of like quote unquote self-care, or I have a moment, I got a half hour, I'm gonna focus on poetry. Let me refine some things, or go back to some unfinished ones. That was whack, delete it. Or, oh, you know what? That's gonna inspire something else, and I'll go for it, right? So I'll use that. It's quick. If I'm in the park, I don't, maybe I don't always do this well, trust me, and my wife's probably listening. I don't always do this well, but if I don't want to be on my phone, right, and I got a little notebook and I'm out with the fam, I'll at least be able to jot something down there. Or
Right.
Sarah encourages me to always have a journal on my nightstand. So at night, right, I don't get on my phone, I can just write something there. Now, my typewriter, that's because people would say that's just the artist in me, the hipster in me, whatever. I don't care. The millennial who I am, what? Like, if I'm gonna be very intentional, add the
Right.
visual piece, I have some time, then I'm gonna like pull out this sweet 1942 Underwood, prop it up and just tap, 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 feel the rhythm, feel the weight of the keys. It's just very different. But that's an intentional moment.
Right.
Something
Okay.
that I've given back. My wife's like, yeah, you go take a half hour. Go, get lost in that world. Stuff like that, and so we can do it that way. Or that's
So of the three, which do you find that your writing is different compared to what you're using?
Wow.
Out of the three?
Yes, actually. Yes. The typewriter, talking about being very intentional, right? Because I don't, the visual aspect, but like I'm focusing, it's not like on a keyboard. Like I'm typing, but I have to press.
Oh, yeah.
I'm pressing through the keys. What am I saying? What am I writing? Also, this is going to be a visual aspect, right? What's it going to come up? So like, and there's no delete button, which sometimes adds to the piece, but like there's a little more refinement and thought, right? If I'm journaling, right, like how I'm gonna write that there, and sometimes with the note app, it could be as simple as hit the microphone, record it, and just speak, right, and just let that flow real fast,
Yeah.
right? Or I'm just texting away. But yeah, those are definitely very different. And again, how much time are you gonna give to it? Yeah, and they come off differently for sure. I probably have, not probably, I have way more poems on my phone.
Right.
Secondary
Yeah.
would be journals. Third would be my typewriter. And I've had my typewriter longer than I've even called myself a poet. So there, again, it's about the time.
Yeah.
The time that you're gonna put into it.
Yeah, I've been wanting to invest in a typewriter. I haven't done that yet. You brought up something that I really need to do, is instead of always writing or typing out my poems on my phone with the notes app, I need to start just voice record
Yeah, voice
and
recording.
just having it transcribed, because I have some thoughts sometimes, and man, I'm glad we're having this conversation. Like I might be driving, and of course you can't start writing,
No.
but I never think like just get this,
Just record it, bro.
and I'm like, I'll write it down later. Most of the time that works, and then some of the times I forget what I thought about.
So especially for I have my recording app and my notes app next to each other for that reason. Either I'm going to record something and just talk, get it out, and I'll go back and listen to it and transcribe, or I'm gonna open up the notes app, start a new note, and then write that piece there. But at least they're right next to each other for the purpose of if I'm driving or in a spot. I had to organize myself in that way.
Last question. Well, might not be last question, but do you have a title for your book yet?
I do not.
You do not?
I don't. Right now it's just called La Frontera, which just means the border in Spanish. And that's kind of what it's been for a few years. I'm wondering if it stays like that and I add a tagline, stories of the sojourners or something like that. These pieces are so precious to me. I don't want to monetize somebody's pain, somebody's hurt and trauma, right? And so even, I honestly have it in mind that any proceeds that come from this book just go to support, nonprofits or lawyers that do pro bono work, or, just stuff like that. Because this is somebody's world in life that, as much as I've been privileged to enter in and allowed to enter in, it's not mine to just, again, make money off of somebody's plight, or to have an adventure on somebody else's chaos. This isn't whitewater rafting. This is a person. Anyway, sorry. So I'm trying to figure out, how do I honor these people these image bearers of God, and in the title, with so many diverse stories, even though there's a lot of similar threads, but they're diverse. But also, how do I capture somebody's attention? Because I promised them that I would echo their stories. Like, that's one promise I can make. Yeah, your story will be shared. You will be remembered because I shared your story, right? And so I can't promise you you'll be a citizen. I can't promise you you'll be in, but I can promise your story will be shared. So how do I want to do that with the title, that capture somebody's attention and that they'll say, wow, I want to buy that piece and learn something new, or engage in compassion. Heck, maybe I'll frustrate somebody to make a change, but like, either way, the story's gonna be told. So that's why I haven't figured out what the title is, but right now it's just called The Border, in Spanish, La Frontera.
Man, you just reminded me.
Terrence, you and I could talk all day though.
Yeah, I know. That bilingual workshop you did was really dope.
Thanks.
That poetry workshop, that was a really dope experience, man. Will you be doing any more workshops?
I would like to. It's a matter of who will host, and yeah, would somebody do something like that? I'm always willing to do that, and again, just bridge the gap through diversity, English and Spanish.
Yeah.
And just teach something different, But yeah, it's a matter of if somebody wants to host that and just getting out, and I'll do it, to be honest. That's what it is. So I am working some little side project. It's in the works because I don't know if it's going to be solidified or approved, but the South Carolina Commission for Minorities reached out to me.
Okay.
And they want to do something like that, or to bring the arts and poetry through not just like Spanish speakers, but like, the Gullah Geechee community, and just again the Minority Commission for South Carolina, whatever that means. So we're in initial talks of trying to figure something like that, and I'm hoping I can bring something to light. And hey, it'll be nice to get paid.
Yeah.
I do a ton for free, but it's like I got a kid now, so some extra money might be nice.
Yeah.
But if somebody who's willing to host something like that, the workshop is there. I'm there, and I will do it, bilingual or in Spanish, Spanglish, stuff like that. So, but that was fun.
Oh man, good stuff. Yeah, that was. Before I let you get out of here, how can my listeners connect with you? Reach out to you? Hey, maybe somebody want to donate to a project or something, or
Yeah, I guess Instagram is always the best bet. At Tethered Words Poetry, but words is WRDS. So Tethered Words WRDS Poetry. That's also my email, tetheredwordspoetry@gmail.com. But those are probably the two easiest ways to connect. I got Tethered Words on TikTok, trying to put out something different and creative there. That honestly, it's been fun. I probably put out 12 little videos there. It is something different, and the engagement is different for poets on TikTok. But either way, Tethered Words Poetry, that's me. Find me on Instagram, email me. Yeah, let's connect.
All right. Well, thank you again for coming on. I appreciate you, man.
I appreciate you, dude.
And to my listeners, remember, keep pushing forward. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Brown Sugar Cafe podcast. Once again, I'm your host, Terrence P. Elmore, and this is the place where poetry meets conversation. Hit that follow button and turn on your notifications so you won't miss an episode. Check out my blog, thebrownsugarcafe.blog. Also connect with me on Instagram at thebrownsugarcafe. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and as always, remember, keep pushing forward.